Okay, so I guess I'd like to call to order the Infrastructure Committee meeting for May 27th, 2025. There were minutes in the packet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do we have a motion to?
For March, move to approve the March minutes for.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Okay. Next we have action items for Borough Council. So the stormwater bump out proposal for says Dudley Avenue, Conway Avenue, and Grayling Avenue.
Yep, so we wrapped up the plans for this project. Final plans have been prepared, so we're ready to take this one to the streets, get it out to bid, and get that process moving. We obviously nailed down our location, so we have the one bump out on the intersection of Conway and Stewart, sort of on Conway Ave on the southeast side of that intersection, and also on Dudley and Stewart. That one would be on Dudley, sort of on the northwestern side of the intersection there. And then we have the two bump outs on Grayling. The last time we met, we had the conversation with some of the residents, and so they had some hesitancy about parking issues, things like that. So we landed on that we would reduce the size of the two bump outs on Grayling to take out 2 spaces down to about 1 space for each of those. So we're expecting to get borough's approval, or the council's approval, at the June 5th meeting, so that we can take it out to bid on the week of June 9th. And then we're anticipating that we'd then be able to award the project ahead of the July 17th council business meeting. I think that's about it for this project, unless you guys have any questions.
Just want to double check that. So the bump outs that are planned near corners, are they as close as they can be to corners, so that we don't lose
Yeah.
right-of-way space? Okay.
I believe the two on, they're at the very least they're kind of hugging the sign, the signs on the intersection that says no parking from here to the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So that space is still available for for cars to have that space available. And I believe on Grayling we have the one right against that sign, and then on the other side of Grayling we kind of have them. We don't have them side by side. We kind of have them offset from each other, just so that it doesn't create a pinch point in the roadway essentially.
I also wanted to mention that in the last meeting I had sort of asked about the idea of putting them in front of fire hydrants, but that has been, I've since received an answer that is not possible. I just want everyone to know. I did ask about that, and it's not a thing that can be done. So we need to keep access in front of hydrants.
Okay.
I just had one quick question on so I know that there's a distance to they have to be a certain distance from the corner in order for emergency vehicles turning radii.
Mm-hmm.
Is right. I wasn't sure if and this wouldn't be a question for us, this would probably be a question for public health and safety, but I just wasn't sure if there was any way to kind of deflector posts that could extend the visual pinch point up to the corner for traffic calming purposes. Because I know that it had been discussed as ancillary traffic calming measures, but then it couldn't extend that far just because you can't drive over it. You can drive over reflection posts, and I've seen that kind of done elsewhere. I just wasn't sure. Again, not a question for us. I just of interest. Wasn't sure if that was something that we considered.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I know that we put in, I think Public Works had put in deflector posts on the 4 existing bump outs that are
Right.
there now, like kind of along the curve of those bump outs.
Yeah,
So I imagine, they could probably do something similar to that, but I'm not sure, what the feasibility is of doing anything in addition to that.
yeah. Yeah, just because I'd seen them there, and so I just wasn't sure if like it would be something feasible or simple to extend it so that you have actual, like a pinch point at the intersection itself, like from a traffic, like mini road diet type thing. It seems like that's like a natural. But anyway, so I just wanted to ask about that generally, just since we're already going to be changing kind of configuration, and since that space you're not allowed to park in it as is, it seemed like it might be a low
Budget kind of idea.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's something we could definitely, look forward to.
So, do we need to take any formal action, or just, we can say it was here and there were no objections?
That's correct, yeah. So this is just to give final blessing to the design, and then typically we wouldn't want to take this action at a workshop, but just given the scheduling of the meetings in June and the timeline that we need to keep, we are going to be asking council to take action at the June 5th work session to advertise the bid for this. And as Tony was explaining, that will then go out to bid, and then we'll have the contract awarded at the July business meeting. You said that was July 17th?
Yeah, I'm looking at my calendar right here. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so that'll be the July 17th. So we do need to get this out to bid in order to award it in July so that they can start working and get this done. So our timeline for completion is how long once the bid is awarded? What's the construction sequence timeline do we anticipate?
Yeah, once we, probably, about maybe a couple weeks from award to pre-con, and then once we have our pre-con meeting, they should be able to do this project within less than a month. That's what we'd expect.
So the only action today is just for kind of overall blessing of the design, and then we'll have this before you next week for the work session to advertise the bid.
yeah, I was just asking if we need to take a formal vote, or,
I don't think so.
good, okay. Okay, so moving on to the sidewalk restoration plan.
Yep, so similarly, we have this sidewalk plan to restore in-kind sidewalk around, basically around Arbor Park, so along Haverford, along North Wynwood, and along Windsor. So there's probably about, I'd say maybe probably close to like 200 blocks worth of sidewalk to replace kind of along that whole stretch. So we're expecting that we can take this project out to bid with the bump outs and kind of give it the same schedule for bid time and probably about the same time for construction as well. There's a few. There's a little bit of curb replacement too that we're also going to do, kind of along that same stretch, and replace a few handicap ramps, and then another ramp that leads up to the library is still. So I guess sort of in question, you're thinking that we'll put that in as an add alternate for the handicap ramp that leads from the sidewalk up to the actual library. We were thinking that we put that in as an add alternate for council to discuss that item. But we have the final plans, established for this project as well. We're ready to take this one to the streets also. So it should be a pretty simple, straightforward project.
Good.
And if I'm looking at it right, the darker ones are the ones to be replaced, the lighter ones are just existing sidewalk to remain.
Yep.
I did have one quick question, just because I heard, I shouldn't assume, but the folks that use mobility devices have described to me that the difficulty of when the sidewalk area is narrow and you're coming onto it, the turning radii on it can be difficult if there's not a little bit more space to actually make the turn. It doesn't seem to be an issue in like the area in front of the library, because you've got like an additional kind of like block behind it, and then like on the corners it doesn't. But I wasn't sure if like the crossing area, like right, across from Narbrook Park, if you guys had any thoughts about the radius on a mobility device, if you're kind of crossing that and turning, and if that was an issue, if there was any ability to just provide a little bit of additional kind of like.
And you're thinking of where, I'm sorry, along,
So that we've got like the crossing at Windsor and Narbrook. There's kind of like those two, and we're already gonna be, I guess, potentially doing ADA ramps there.
oh, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that, that is one of the, we have that called out to replace that ramp, and yeah, we're gonna, replace that to make sure that it's ADA compliant, so if that means, extending the sidewalk, to give that additional depth, that additional required depth, then yeah, that's what we'll be doing.
Okay, I only asked that because it wasn't like called out as potentially being widened, but this is just showing like locations of things.
For the most part,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, we'll call out and say, yeah, we're putting an ADA compliant, curb ramp here, so, that means, if there's additional area that needs to be used, to make that compliant, then, that's what we'll do.
Yeah, so because I assume that the ADA would control for whatever the turning radius you would need to get up onto a thing in a device.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, other questions?
When is this gonna take place?
So it should be the same time frame as the bump outs, so we'll advertise at the June 5th work session, go out to bid around the week of June 9th, and then award leading up to the July business meeting.
Any chance we could avoid the one outside the War Memorial? Looks substantial, and we could avoid are there Veterans Day ceremonies there?
Or you think that'll be done before then?
Yeah, we should have,
Okay.
we anticipate construction to take place probably around like, August, September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super.
And what's the lifetime on this sort of replacement?
I believe, I want to say about 20 years.
And just as a reminder for council, this is a capital project that we've budgeted for this year.
Yeah.
So that's already in our financials.
Yeah, perfect.
But I assume that unlike the project at the Citizens Bank, there'll be some accommodations made, for how people would walk, would route around that during the
Yeah.
construction.
Yes. We'll make sure that the proper, the proper signage is up, and we have, other, we make the sidewalk feasible for pedestrians to still, move around it,
Okay.
things like that, yeah.
Yeah, because I would assume you'd be doing these like chunk by, it's not like you're shutting down the entire like thing all at once, right?
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
just do
but
it.
but
No,
what
no,
happened
you're
in the
totally
last
right,
project
yeah.
is that they had to walk in the street. and
Right,
they
which
weren't-
was not good.
They didn't set up the right barrels or whatever.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that that's gonna be a condition of the bid requirements, and that the contractor will have to tell us what the pedestrian reroute plan is.
Yeah, that's typically what we'll do, yeah.
Okay,
Sounds good.
moving on to the Narberth Avenue Bridge. Is that Jesse?
Greetings, everyone.
Hi, Jesse.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay. I believe everyone's aware. I appreciate, actually, let me start by saying I appreciate Tony covering for me at the council meeting last Thursday. Everyone should be aware the bridge was successfully bid. There were 3 contractors who ended up bidding. Because all those contractors are pre-qualified by PennDOT, PennDOT's typical process is to go with the low bid, which was RoadCon Inc. At about $13.3 million. we coordinated with PennDOT to address, there was a price discrepancy between our estimate and the contractors. My understanding is we're smoothed over on that end, and should be moving towards notice to proceed at the beginning of August. I also understand from talking with Tony and Maggie after the fact that there were some questions about the construction duration, the schedule there. I'm happy to try to provide more insight into any of the changes if there are still questions, or if there are any other questions on the process from here.
Well, the question was, do we have a schedule from the contractor yet?
So, as far as the agreement goes, or
Do
the
they have a
contractor's actual construction
yet,
schedule?
or are they still developing that?
Okay. Pannoni drafts actually any consultant will draft a construction schedule, a pre-bid construction schedule as part of the process. One of the things PennDOT asks us to do pretty typically is to be conservative with that. The drivers for this project were seasonal restrictions, a lot of work with Amtrak requiring nightly outages, and it ended up stretching the schedule to a 4-year period. My understanding is in years past, Pannoni had delivered a shorter duration schedule that showed maybe a 2-year window, or at one point it was only assumed to be a 3-year window. And the explanations for the changes are unfortunately just like the progression of the project. You may recall years ago, at one point there was plans to be a pedestrian structure, a secondary temporary bridge that was going to be put in place to carry pedestrian traffic. Working with Amtrak, PennDOT, and I believe the borough, we moved away from that direction. The benefit is additional permits, additional right-of-way requirements were not needed. It's a simpler process to not have to build another structure, but we did end up needing to then stage the construction of our bridge. So we're doing a partial width demolition, partial construction, demolishing the remainder of the construction.
Is the point
Just
of
do-
that to maintain pedestrian access during the?
Yes, exactly. So one of the requirements that we wanted to meet was providing pedestrian access through, or using either the existing bridge or the proposed bridge at all times. There should be no windows where pedestrians cannot cross.
But the question is, when does the contractor owe you like their schedule?
Yeah, they're required to submit a schedule. It'll be in the early weeks of having notice to proceed. Frankly, I would imagine they're starting to look at it at this point. Nothing official, they don't get paid for anything prior to that notice to proceed point, so none of it will appear until after, I think August 4th is the calendar date. I think once that notice to proceed is issued, we can help set up meetings with the contractor, make them aware of the concerns about the schedule and in the location that it's at, with residential and commercial properties on each side. We want to be sure we're getting this right. And I guess the other takeaway here is, as I mentioned, Pannoni's schedule was intended to be very conservative. Theirs will be real.
Right.
The good news is the contract is awarded based on that end date in July 2029. So their schedule may not go beyond that point. So they could only hopefully find efficiencies and ways to increase their own efficiency, decrease that schedule time, deliver sooner.
Well, it's just to their advantage to be done more quickly
Yeah.
because they don't have to be mobilized for as long. So I'm just asking, like,
Yep.
roughly when will we know what their schedule is?
Apologies, maybe it seems like I'm dancing around your question then. I can't say for sure. I'm hoping by mid-August, say at the latest, we should be have something in hand at September. I remind you all that you will have TPD, another consulting firm, on board to do construction inspection, but also provide some construction management services.
Mm-hmm.
They will help broker a lot of this and urge the contractor to get that stuff submitted.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
that was it.
So are we definitely, this is definitely a project that takes longer than 2 years now, or this is,
Yes.
are we, what are we hoping for?
I've not worked with RoadCon personally in the past. So maybe they're superheroes and they have some special tricks in their belt and they'll be able to deliver, within a shorter time period. But I don't anticipate that it would be less than a 3-year. We're feeling very comfortable with the 4-year on the basis of some of what I rattled off before. There's going to be some seasonal restrictions, especially, and then being limited to nighttime work for all of their demolition and setting their beams and everything. And in Amtrak world, nighttime work is even more constrained. They're going to have at most like a 6-hour window on a given night to do work over the tracks, which just really slows things down for them.
That's just, that limit's only on demo, it's not on construction as well?
It will be on construction as well. When they're erecting beams, they'll have their cranes set, need to swing them over. Luckily, they're single span beams. We've only got 8 of them. We should be good. I'm sorry, this one has 10. We have 10 of them on this project. I'm hoping it's a night or two of setting them, but then they'll have to put deck pan, they pour the concrete, anything that's over the tracks until they get basically the barriers in place will probably be under nighttime restriction. And Amtrak will have flag people out there monitoring a lot of this.
Gotcha.
Is there another bridge in the area that's been constructed like this that we can sort of look to that and see we have a similar timetable?
Yeah. Project. Our PennDOT PM, who's been helping Alexa Harper, does all these local bridge deliveries. She's referenced a couple in the past. I can check with her and see if we can get schedules for those, just to monitor against how we're proceeding here. The thing we'd want to watch is, again, if they were staged construction or not. There's a decent chance we added anywhere from a couple months to a year by needing to go staged on this one.
So we're going to have a meeting at some point with the community, right? Do you have a rough idea when that would be? Probably better to do it in September than August, but.
Right, we had talked about scheduling that in June, but based on the recommendation from Jesse and our bridge team, because the contractor doesn't have a final schedule yet, they're working through that over the next couple of months, and then once we get the notice to proceed, so we're going to be working with the contractor and our consultants to schedule that sometime in later August or September. Probably September, just because that's when people are back from summer vacations and we'll have a community meeting and more people will be around to hear where we are with that. So we're targeting late August or September community meeting, making sure that the contractor is good with that and bring them in to have them give a presentation about their schedule.
Okay. Thanks. Other questions?
So it's just a little bit new to me that this was going to take longer than 2 years.
Yeah, well, it's new to all of us.
Yes, yes. So, I've been telling people that it's going to take about 2 years. So I'm going to have to walk that back.
Let that be a lesson to all of us.
Yeah, I guess so. There's nothing we can do to modify this project that will get it back into the original 2-year estimate.
Well, I mean, it sounds like one of the big changes that occurred is that they're gonna make do with the existing bridge and the new bridge for pedestrian access.
Yeah, but we've known that for a while, haven't we?
We have known that for a while. I've gone back through records to try to figure out when exactly, or to try to map out the shift in the schedule for my own sanity. And I can't pin when exactly it would have changed. Can only regret not being better in the updates that I've given over the last 2 years now to spell out the length of anticipated construction here. I'll admit that when we got to the final documentation, when we were getting ready to advertise this, that I think at that point, because of the seasonal restrictions, we were right on the cusp of finishing at the end of like 3.5 years. And then when you get to that winter season, you lose essentially 3 months of work potentially because they can't do concrete work. Or not that they can't, we assume in our scheduling that they can only do very limited concrete work, very limited asphalt work because of temperature restrictions, as well as holidays lost. It ended up adding another 3 months or so. which is not good from the borough's perspective. It's good to capture that from the contract perspective, because there'd be an issue if we bid this and then the contractor came back and said, you have it as 3 years, we think it's going to take 4. That's a much harder situation to overcome. So painful to swallow, I can certainly understand, but I think it will be better now to have it extended than to find out it needs to be extended. And if Pannoni can assist in any of the messaging to the borough, please let us know. Obviously, we're on to help get this thing to the finish line, so want to help own where it's at right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. And then, is there other project status from the borough engineer this month?
No, I believe that's it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's no members of the public here that I see?
No.
So no public comment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks, Eric.